I now call to order the Enhanced Law Enforcement District Budget Committee, and I will ask if the Budget Committee members would introduce themselves first, and we'll start with Sheriff Brandenburg and go this way.
Sheriff's Finance Manager Nancy Artman.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mark Wells.
Gavin Carpenter.
James Rhodes.
And over here.
Caroline Parker.
Mike Wilson.
Well, welcome all for coming today and serving. I will now open the floor for nominations for chair.
Commissioner Smith, I nominate Mark Wells as chair. Second.
Mark Wells has been nominated for chair, and it has been seconded. Any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Gavin Carpenter.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Caroline Parker.
Aye.
Commissioner Schull.
Aye.
Mark Wells.
Aye.
Michael Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
James Rhodes.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye. Motion carries 10-0. Be reminded, please, there are 10 voting members present here today. Congratulations to Mr. Wells. You are the chair. I hand over the gavel to you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to nominate Gavin Carpenter as secretary.
Second that.
Gavin Carpenter has been nominated. Are there any other nominations?
Was there a second?
I believe.
I seconded it.
Thank you.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Michael Wilson.
Aye.
Gavin Carpenter.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Schull.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Caroline Parker.
Aye.
James Rhodes.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Chair Wells.
Aye.
Chair, the result is 10-0.
Very good. The vote is in, and congratulations, Mr. Carpenter. You are the secretary for this day's hearing. As a first order of business, Sheriff Brandenburg, I understand that you are asking for a vote of this committee to receive information. Would you address the committee on that matter, please?
Yes, Chair Wells. Last week, I sent the committee information that I have prepared an alternative budget for the ELED that is balanced. I'm asking for the opportunity to present my proposed budget to you at a future hearing date. If you vote yes, then this committee can direct the county to publish notice of a future meeting at least one day out, and my proposed budget can be circulated to you for deliberation.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Magcor, our county counsel, would you explain to me what budget would be presented first?
Typically, with local budget law, Chair Smith, it would be the budget officer would be presenting. The budget officer is County Administrator Schmidt. He has delegated budget officer authority for this ELED presentation to Sandra Montoya. So she would be first to present the, basically the district manager's budget, and then the sheriff would have an opportunity to speak to it after that. But it's up to the chair as well.
Okay. Commissioner Savas?
Is it Wells, Chair Wells?
Yes, sir.
Chair Wells, I have a question for both the administrator, the budget officer, and the legal. In my 25 years of public service doing public budgets, I've never heard of seeing anything like this. It seems to me that it's highly irregular, and I need to better understand the legalities of trying to introduce two budgets on the same day with not even hearing the first one first, which is presented by the budget officer. So I'm a little, is that even actually legal?
You would hear from the district budget officer, Administrator Schmidt, like I said, who delegated the authority for this ELED budget presentation to Finance and Sandra Montoya. That is the budget you have before you. If an elected official wanted to present an alternative budget, he or she certainly could ask the committee, the budget committee, do you want to receive my budget? Do you want to receive it and review it? Ideally, that would be noticed and provided to the public at least one day beforehand in compliance with public meetings law. But if the tweak was a minor one, I want 1.1 here instead of 1.8, that could be done under this board's authority during the deliberation itself. So it depends on what's being offered by the elected official. I really don't know the details of the proposed alternative budget.
Yeah, well, I know I got the budget before me for ELED over a week ago. And I would expect the same courtesy for if there's be another budget committee meeting on this topic, if there's a vote here that supports that ample time be given for that and properly noticed so the public also has ample opportunity. If, again, there is a interest in entertaining two budgets. Thank you.
In relation, I'm sorry, go ahead. Commissioner Schultz.
Yes, and trying to ferret our way through this. The Oregon Revised Statute 294.331 says that our budget officer is our county administrator. Also, County Code 209.060 also states that the county budget officer is the county administrator. Now, if there's another budget to be looked at, yeah, I'm curious in seeing that, but we can't compare the budget that you recommended until we've scrubbed through this one that we have at hand today. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
I would like to raise a motion to the committee today. I would move that Sheriff Brandenburg submit her alternative budget to this committee and that the county be directed to publish notice of a future meeting at least one day out to discuss the alternative budget. Do I have a second, please?
I second that.
Thank you, Michael. We have a second to the motion that Sheriff Brandenburg will submit an alternative budget to this committee and the county will be directed to publish notice of the future meeting at least one day to discuss the alternative budget. Can you please call the roll?
Let's card up.
For discussion.
Discussion.
Oh, I apologize. Mr. Rose.
Thank you. For Mr. Madcore, does this require a public meeting notice and a delay, or is there an opportunity that we can proceed with this? I'd like to hear the sheriff's budget. Can we do that today, minus the notice and another delay? We're all here to debate the budget today.
I would say this, Mr. Rhodes, that this meeting is noticed. There is a budget that's posted. I don't know what's being presented by the sheriff's office. It depends upon the scope of it. Is it going to require overnight consideration? I think you're well within your rights to discuss and hear from the sheriff today. If it is granular, if there's a lot of details that differ from the budget officer's budget, then I would recommend that you have it noticed and you have it vetted and you do it in a manner that gives full transparency and members of the public access, and it would inevitably delay this proceeding at least one day.
To repeat your last part, so if there's if it would require a one-day notice for deliberation, essentially?
It would be for notice and posting, and that would be at a minimum. My understanding is yours has been published and up for
7 days.
Yeah, at least a week, exactly. But this is a fair continuation of an existing and a duly noticed budget conversation on the ELED. If it were to go to the sheriff's office budget, which is, I think, for tomorrow, that'd be a different story as well. I mean, It might delay it even further. It depends on the differences between the two. And again, I haven't seen the sheriff's budget, proposed budget.
Thank you.
Yep.
Pardon my ignorance of the process, but I'd like to add a comment to my motion in that this whole process, to Commissioner Savis's point, is very rushed. I believe it lacks transparency. I, as part of the ELAD, just was made aware of this budget, I don't even know the timeline, less than a month ago, well, it was a week ago, and then we found out mere 3 weeks ago of the complete change in the budget process. This is my second time participating in this, and it was very different from what we're seeing today. So that's the reason for my motion. So is there any other discussion? Commissioner West.
Chair Wells, to your comment, I'll add to that, all departments knew the cost allocation plan that was changing last fall. We knew of these budgets. These things have been noticed. The number wasn't available till January 1st, but the sheriff's office knew that there would be an impact in March 2023. I think that there's been plenty of notice to how this has been presented and what's been out there. This is highly irregular.
Well, I'll say for myself as a volunteer, 1 week's time I've given notice from the sheriff, who her job is to advise the ELAD Advisory Committee on any changes. We were given notice of this very brief amount of time ago. Again, to Commissioner Savis's point, for volunteers serving on this committee, we need a little more time to look at a comprehensive and complex budget. So I appreciate the comments already laid out here today that for ELAD budget advisory members here today, who are all volunteers and most of us have full-time jobs, a little more time would be respected. Hence, again, my motion.
There's another comment.
I believe we have Commissioner Savis and then Commissioner Shull.
Yeah, I'm going to be, if I need to vote against it, I'll vote against it if need be. I will stand up for public process. I will stand up for notice. I will stand up for respecting your time as finding another day off to meet here in the future if need be, right? But more importantly, the public. I think it's important that as elected officials, that all of us, especially elected officials, are candid and bring forth good facts and good information in the best interest of the public. Unfortunately, there's been some information circulated that I find very, very disturbing, and a lot of constituents who called me, knocked on my door, stopped by my house, were asking me questions, and I think there's a lot of bad information out there right now, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's going to confuse things here today. So therefore, I'm going to make a couple comments. Number one, we, I believe all my colleagues are united on this, have said for weeks, months, that we are not going to cut any positions, that we will, if need be, we will line item guarantee every position funded in the Sheriff's Department. We made that perfectly clear. So I want to put that out in the forefront. Allocated cost, I think there needs to be an explanation of what allocated costs are. There seems to be some confusion. There's an IGA with the sheriff, with ELED, that identifies what those are. Everyone knows, if no one in this room knows that everyone's suffering high inflation, businesses, everyone, it's gonna bubble up. And one of those ways it bubbles up is allocated cost. Those are operational costs. I've been a business owner for my entire adult life, and I can tell you that, yeah, I didn't like it when costs went up, but I still had to pay my bills. I still had to pay my staff to write paychecks for the human resources, all the things that allocated costs do. So I think it's imperative that the people get good information, and especially to this the heightened nature of what's been released here to the public, that good public notice, at least 7 days, is in order if there's any effort to have a second presentation of a second budget. I will not deprive the public of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Savis. Commissioner Shull.
Yes, thank you, Chair Wells. If the point of conflict here today is allocated costs, is that the case? If it is, could we look at using general funds to pay that allocated cost for FY 23-24? Now, I'm looking at breakdown of the materials and services for ELED in the budget proposed by the county administrator, it comes to $8,557,000 and change. Allocated costs of that, out of that, is $490,946, or 5.8%, roughly, of the total materials and services. Could we move right along today by, if we were to use general funds to cover the $490,000 allocated costs for LED for this upcoming fiscal year, for this next budget, and then work through the issue again during the next year so that we don't have this stalemate come budget time next year? Would that work? Can I have an opinion, Administrator Schmidt?
If you direct me to do that, I could do that. The sheriff did receive a subsidy this upcoming fiscal year for allocated costs, as did many departments, one time only to handle the steep increase. So
Yeah.
that's possible if you direct me to do that.
Because we do intend to augment the cost of allocated, the allocated costs for the sheriff's department. So I'm thinking, why can't we do that this year? Chair Wells, what's your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, I would like to look at, I would like to have both budgets presented to me, and I think I would like to look at both the pros and cons and what confidence I have in the two budgets. Having not seen both budgets to be able to compare, I don't feel like I
Yeah,
answer
and
that.
again, my last comment is, if the only point of friction between the sheriff's budget and the one proposed by the county budget officer is cost allocation, then I think we can solve that today relatively painlessly.
I will say that I have some concerns on my understanding on the revenue model. It's calling for an 8% increase. The LED has experienced, I believe it's a 2.75% increase since 2000. I'm very concerned that if that revenue forecast comes in lower, we're going to have to cut more positions than potentially might be forecasted to be cut in a prudent budget. So it's not just the cost allocation. I have concerns about other parts of the county administrator's budget that I've had a chance to review. So I don't think it's a singular issue, Commissioner Shull.
Okay. Yeah, one last comment. I have not heard any suggestion from anyone on the Board of Commissioners that would indicate that there was even a slight consideration of reducing any FTEs for the ELED. Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes, thank you. The sheriff had an opportunity to post her budget on OpenGov, just like all the other budgets. If she knew that she was going to have an alternative budget, I would suggest the sheriff should probably follow the rules of budget law, just like everybody else is. And secondly, I think we do need to go through the administrator's budget first, so therefore I will not support the motion today.
I believe we're still in discussion for my motion. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Commissioner Sacks.
Chair Wells, I appreciate your comments. It probably is more complicated than simply allocated cost, but just for the public that's watching that doesn't have the paperwork in front of them, I just want to say that the amended budget on this paper that's presented by the administrator is 8 for last year, for 22-23, this fiscal year, is $8,248,041. The budget presented by the administrator is more than that, at $8,888,752. There's no staff cuts in this budget, period, and there's no decreases in funding. It's an increase. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to call the vote.
All right. I believe we have more discussion.
Just clarification for me. The motion is to provide an opportunity in the future, day or so away from now, to discuss this budget. If voting yes would give an opportunity for the sheriff to present a budget.
Correct.
Would voting no mean that then the sheriff would present the sheriff's budget today?
If that is an option, that would be my request, yes, but
What was the original motion?
sure. The motion that I put forth is I move that Sheriff Brandenburg submit her alternative budget to this committee and that the county be directed to publish notice of a future meeting at least one day out to discuss the alternative budget.
So the motion is to delay this proceedings.
If that's what it entails, yes. I would like to see, as I believe my fellow members, I won't speak for them, they certainly can, but to look at both budgets and to look at our concerns and my concerns specifically that I have with it, yes.
Commissioner West called for the vote on that particular motion.
Clerk, please call the poll.
Mr. Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
No.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
No.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Interest of public notice, no.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Interest of public notice, no.
Chair Smith?
Interest of public notice and in accordance with Oregon budget law, no.
Chair Wells?
Aye.
Can we proceed with the budget?
Chair Wells, the vote is 5-5.
And in a tie, motion
In a tie, the
fails.
motion fails, Chair.
All right, thank you. As a second order of business, as Chair of the ELED, last week I sent a letter to the County Administrator and the Board of Commissioners regarding the ELED's concern that the county's new cost allocation methodology and new administrative overhead costs do not follow the contract requirements between the county and the ELED. At this time, I'll ask Secretary Gavin to please read my letter into the record.
I'll read this verbatim. County Administrator Schmidt, Chair Smith, and County Commissioners. My name is Mark Wells. I'm the Chair for the Enhanced Law Enforcement District Advisory Committee, and I'm authorized to write this letter on behalf of the ELED Advisory Committee. The county has changed its cost allocation plan, which will increase the ELED's cost allocations by over $132,000 in the next fiscal year. The change in the allocation cost plan, however, does not follow the requirements of the 2003 IGA Section 4. Section 4 requires that the county provide to the ELED by January 1st of each year the allocation amount for the particular service for the next fiscal year. That did not occur. Instead, the ELED learned of the increase and change in allocated cost methodology on May 15, 2023, when the county published the ELED budget. This delay in information negates the ELED's ability to meaningfully understand and discuss the increased costs allocated for each particular service. Further, Section 4 provides that any change in allocation methodology requires the approval of the parties, which did not occur. In addition to allocated costs, the county is charging the ELED with a new cost for, quote, administration overhead, unquote, in an amount over $627,000. This new cost is not provided for in the IGA, either in Section 3 as a firm service or under Section 5 as a limited service. And costs for additional services, Section 5M, requires the parties to agree for the county to provide other services to the ELED and to explain the nature of each service in a memorandum of agreement. This, too, has not occurred. The increase in allocated costs, combined with the new administrative overhead cost, is in addition to several other cost categories that have also increased: CCOM, C-800, workers' comp insurance, and liability insurance. Collectively, ELED costs will increase nearly $1 million. The county's budget doesn't show a reduction in deputies to compensate for the rising costs. Rather, it appears the county is anticipating a rise in ELED tax revenue to offset the nearly $1 million cost increase. A projected increase in tax revenue is difficult to understand since ELED revenue collections have not kept pace with the cost of ELED expenses. In fact, at our most recent ELED meeting, the sheriff notified us that due to expenses outpacing income tax collections, the sheriff proposed to reduce deputy positions from 36 to 33 this upcoming fiscal year. Given the burden of these additional costs that have not been negotiated with the ELED, we are concerned this will mean even more ELED deputy positions will need to be eliminated. We are sensitive and respectful of the many competing challenges facing Clackamas County and this year's budget process. However, as volunteers striving to serve our community and our county government, we are disappointed by the county not following the terms of the IGA and involving the ELED in determining our costs. The failure to do so is detrimental to the interests of the ELED. The ELET Advisory Committee looks forward to addressing our concerns and providing our input and feedback at the ELET budget hearing on May 22nd, 23. Thank you for your time and service. Mark Wells, Chair, ELET Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Secretary Carpenter, for that.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that we present the administrator's budget at this time.
Is there a second for the motion on play?
Second.
Any discussion?
Call for a vote.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Nay.
Commissioner Shull,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
No.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Ms. Parker,
No.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Wells,
No.
Chair, the vote is 6-4.
The motion carries. So I believe the motion was to have the county administrator present the current budget. Is that correct? All right, the floor is yours.
Correct. So I'm going to ask Sandra Montoya, the county budget manager, to present the Enhanced Law Enforcement District proposed budget. Sandra, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Sandra Montoya, Budget Manager for Clackamas County. And Tony, I'm going to have you throw up the presentation, please. So good afternoon, Chair Wells, Commissioners, and Budget Committee members. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. The Enhanced Law Enforcement District is a district that is voted upon by the community, and it provides enhanced services for the unincorporated areas of Clackamas County. And before you today is the 23-24 proposed budget. If you can go to the next slide. So this is just some graphs of the revenues and the expenses. As you can see on the expense side on the right, that the primary expense is materials and services. And all all personnel is charged in materials and services as contracted services, which is why you don't see any personnel in this budget. In fact, this does have personnel. Again, it's charged as contracted services, and it's shown in materials and services. That is also where allocated costs are charged, and so we'll have a further breakdown, and I can respond to any questions that you may have on this. Tony, the next slide, please. The Enhanced Law Enforcement District, the proposed budget for 23-24 is $8.9 million. That is a $640,000 increase from the prior year, and this budget proposes no reductions in the personnel in the Enhanced Law Enforcement District. Next slide, please. Okay, so the primary revenue in the Enhanced Law Enforcement District is property tax revenue, interest revenue, and I'll have to look at the other detail, as I don't remember it right off the top of my head what the other category was. On the material or on the expense side, again, the primary costs are the contracted services, allocated costs, and there is some capital outlay for vehicles in this budget as well. And then the very last item is debt service that will continue in 23-24. The next slide. I believe this is it. I'm prepared to answer any of the detailed questions that you may have. I do want to point out, and Tony, if you'll go back to the revenue and the expense slide, please. I do want to point out one of the biggest changes from and let me back up, CCSO did present or did enter a budget into OpenGov for the departmental reviews. That was the first budget that was entered. And when the reductions were announced to all of the departments, what we received was cuts across CCSO's department, including ELED. And the direction that my team received was, we need to try and find whatever revenue increases, expense reductions, in order to preserve the FTE of this department. They serve an important function, and we don't want the community to suffer. So that was the directive. And as I've shared with the Budget Committee in the past, it's not just this department. It is the norm of the county that when we budget, we tend to be very conservative on the revenue side, and we tend to be more aggressive to protect the budget on the expense side. That's very common for all of the departments. And when we do these budget reviews, we continually call out the revenue projected is too low. We would encourage you, we recommend that you bump it up based on the historical numbers that we are seeing. Again, our budget team, those are recommendations. They are not the requirement. And so the department chose to ignore those recommendations. So when the budget team received instructions, go through this budget, this department's budget, scour and look for opportunities to preserve the staff that is in this department. That is exactly what my team did. And when we look at property tax revenue, and if you'll give me one moment, and I may be jumping to questions that you have, but this is the information I have. I pulled a report on 410. CCSO entered a budget of $7.8 million for property tax. And if you'll give me 1 second, I'm going to go to another report, because year to date, we have 7.9 in property tax received. The year to date, and we've only posted property tax through April. So we still have May and we still have June. We already have more revenue than what was projected for 22-23. And while I recognize that the ELED district is shrinking slightly, overall, we still see an increase in property tax revenue. So what I did was I reprojected 22-23, which has a higher number. I am projecting about 8.1 million, which is roughly what we had budgeted. I believe that all of that revenue will materialize. That number was used as the base to grow 23-24 budget, which is how we got to 8.4 million. I believe that is a more realistic number. The next item that I would call out is interest earnings. Interest earnings year-to-date already exceed the original projection from CCSO. Again, we still have several months of interest earnings to post. So again, with that, and I should point out that next year, so 23-24, interest earnings was posted at 1,500. I believe that may have been a typo, because I projected 150,000. That is 148,500 more than what was put into the budget. I can tell you that would save a position. So that's really important information to have. And so I can absolutely sit before you and say, I believe that the revenue projections that were originally entered into the budget are too low. And I believe, and I hope that mine come to fruition, I believe that they are more sound based on the historical numbers we are seeing. So, and then I'll pause there, because you may have questions on the revenue, and then if you have other questions on the expense, we can get into that.
I believe Commissioner Savas is first.
Yeah, Sandra, thank you. I followed that perfectly. I appreciate your knowledge and clarity in what you just conveyed. I can't, you can't, I can't, we can't explain why those revenue projections from what was entered from the department being so low, and then the cost perhaps and other things being different. So it would be alarming to find out that you were over $1 million off in the negative. But your numbers, our numbers that are come in, I'm pretty confident in, and I think that gives me a lot of confidence in what we have before us today, knowing that those can fluctuate a little bit. I want to say, and many of you have been here for a long time, know that I have been pretty adamant about this district. It's a district. The ELED is a district. And a former friend of mine, former Budget Committee member, Frank Maglin, he passed away about a year ago. He, too, was very focused on the ELED budget. And the challenge has been that in the ballot measure, it provided for or stated that 36 deputies would be part of ELED. But we know that over the years, because of inflation and because of costs increasing and so forth, that we haven't been able to attain or do that for a number of years, which was explained by the sheriff herself last year. So we know we are not getting, because of that fixed millage rate and that compression between expenditures or cost and between revenues, that it really puts the onus on the administration of the ELED, in this case the department, to find, as you stated, Sandra, the cuts as best as possible to maintain the number of deputies, even though we probably don't have the funding to get all there. But again, the fact that we're not cutting any deputies and the fact that the budget is greater than it was last year, I find that refreshing information, and I think the public needs to look at these numbers and realize that there are no cuts projected for this department or this district. Thank you.
I believe it was Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. It seems to me that there's evidence here that, or it's unfortunate that the Sheriff's Department doesn't know the amount of revenue they have, or that their numbers are incorrect. Sandra, I'm very confident in the numbers that you presented here today, and I appreciate that. And I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Savas. Chair Wells, I want to give you the respect of addressing some of the concerns that I'm sure the Sheriff's Office shares regarding that were proposed in your letter that you read, and regarding the budget. I believe it's paragraph 4. You state, you read it already, but just for review, you stated that in addition to allocated costs, the county is charging the ELED with a new cost for administration overhead in the amount of $627,000. This new cost is not provided for in the IGA, neither in Section 3 as a firm service or under Section 5, which I underlined here and made notes about, as a limited service, and cost for the additional services, again, Section 5, requires parties to agree for the county to provide either services to the ELED and to explain the nature of each service. And in an agreement, this has not occurred. And so I just made some notes specifically about that assertion. Did the ELED think that they were going to get the numerous administrative services, fiscal, property management, equipment maintenance, HR, this cost of doing business to keep the lights on, also identified specifically in Section 5 for free? And I ask that because Section 6 states that the labor cost is established in the cost of allocation plan shall consist of, but not limited to, the actual payroll and employee fringe benefit cost of the county employees providing the requested service, the direct expense, the indirect expense, and the overhead for the persons as established by the Department of Employee Services or other method agreed upon by parties. those indirect costs fully distributed the administrative overhead and use the same percentages used by the sheriff's staff to partially spread these overhead costs. So my question again is, does the ELED think that we're going to get you're going to get the numerous administrative benefits without actually paying the full freight?
My easy answer is I don't believe so. My issue with after reviewing the IGA is that the ELED feels that as a party in this IGA with the county, that we were not given an opportunity to agree upon it. And I'm focusing again on Section M. That was our main concern. And again, it was a very compressed timeline to try to get all this together. So I guess after consulting the members of the ELED, our consensus was that we feel that as a party to the signature of the IGA, that we should have been consulted and then been given the opportunity to agree or disagree with some of these changes. So whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. That's
Okay.
my belief and the belief of the ELED.
Okay, it looks like those, early on, starting in January, and then we knew the impact in March on the allocated costs. And then specifically, you're quoting here under Section 5, I guess it's fair to ask today if the ELED thinks that they shouldn't pay the full freight of actual allocated costs, which is standard business practices. Should they not have to do that when every other department does? That's still my question.
I don't understand why we wouldn't. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, we would be paying as every other department would. We wouldn't be an exception unless there's an exception in the IGA, which I don't believe there is.
Thank you, Chair Wells. It's just as different than what your letter states.
Well, again, Commissioner West, I work 70 hours a week. I know several of my ELED members work 60-plus hours a week. Again, we're not coming in here as authorities or budget consultants or experts in this. We're coming in as volunteers to support not only our sheriff and the county. So again, I would appreciate that leniency on potential lack of competency or lack of expertise on all of the nuances of a very complex and vital budget. Thank you.
Chair Wells, can I ask just a quick question?
Of course.
I really appreciate our volunteer members serving on this. I think it's a valuable asset to the county. Like you say, you're volunteers, you're not experts. We don't expect you to be. We do this, 3 or 4 times a week. And we're trying to have points of clarification from a very damaging and untruthful letter that the sheriff put out. That's why we're doing what we're doing today. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask Gary Schmidt to make some comments on who is the ELED.
With respect, the advisory committee is not the ELED. The Board of County Commissioners acting as the governing, you act as the governing body for the Enhanced Law Enforcement District, so it's the 5 people sitting right there, is the ELED. The IGA is between them as the ELED governing board and the Board of County Commissioners, which also happens to be them, but it's an agreement between the board and the board of the ELED. And they make the decisions on cost allocations every year during the budget process, which is what we're doing today. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the clarification. So for the record, so that the members of the ELED here are not considered a legal party to this IGA, is that correct?
The legal party is the Board of Directors of the ELED and the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Madcourt can correct me if I'm wrong, please.
You're correct, Gary.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the clarification. Commissioner Savas, I believe you're next, and then.
Yeah, Gary, I listened intently. I read the letter, but I also listened when it was read into the record. Knowing that the allocated costs change and there's, visits to that reflect inflation, not as consistent as they should be, right? And knowing that COVID, they're usually about 2 years in the arrears, but before 2 years ago, for example, we're now seeing the cost increases. And during that period of time, we saw substantial cost increases across the board, virtually in every industry. As I heard them read in the record, I heard the word methodology several times. Now, was there a wholesale change in the methodology?
Yes.
Okay. And when was all of that known to the department heads and the other districts and so forth?
Appointed department heads and elected officials were notified in July 2022 that I was going to propose revamping the entire cost allocation model. We hired a consultant in November, what is this year? November 2022, I notified department directors and elected officials there were going to be changes. I did not finalize the actual numbers until March 2023. That is correct. But it was fair note, everyone knew almost a year ago that the model would be changed, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just going back to my original question, did both parties discuss that and agree upon that allocate or that methodology change?
They're doing that right now. At the budget process is when that occurs.
All right, I need, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you. Sandra, the revenue, you mentioned that your math is based on historical revenue. And can you show us the history? I'm looking for what that historical increase has been, not the budgeted, but the actual tax revenue increase, as many years back as you can pull me. I'm looking for the percentage that it has actually been going up year by year in comparison to your estimate this year, and what the deviation would be.
Yes, I can. And I don't know, Tony, I don't know the logistics of being able to share OpenGov on the fly, or that may be a little bit more difficult. OpenGov is our budgeting system, and we have data in there back to fiscal year 18-19. And
I don't need to go back that far.
Okay, so.
That's not what, let me rephrase. A handful of years.
Okay, so I can tell you that in 18-19, budget to actual and property tax was roughly 150,000 greater than the budget. In 19-20, it was 70,000 less, so that one was lower. In 2021, it was, 180,000 over what was budgeted. In 21-22, it was, looks like just a little under, maybe 90,000 under, and I'm just doing math in my head. And this year, the budget is 8.1. The projections were 7.7 million. To date, we have 7.8 million. And if we look at the history, the last 2 months brings roughly 200 to 250,000, which is how I got to the 8.1 million.
And then how do we get to the 8.44?
And I applied a growth factor of, I want to say I did, it was like 3 or 4%. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was the assessed value growth that we were projecting in Clackamas County.
Have we actually experienced that degree or percentage of growth in previous years?
Yes, so what I did is I measured the growth. Some years it's been 2%, some years it's been 4.5%. So there was a mix because it's in the unincorporated area. But just looking at that and looking at, I believe I also pulled some data records from the Oregon Economist about different counties that are growing. While Portland County or Washington County is shrinking, this county continues to grow. And so that was the methodology that I used.
Thank you. Second part to my question is I'd like to hear from the Sheriff's Office, because I know that you have some concerns and feel differently about this number and the historic. And so I'm willing to entertain your opinion on that.
Sorry, apologize. Nancy Artman, Finance Manager for the Sheriff's Office.
Chair Wells, may I address Mr. Rhodes' questions?
Yes, you may, thank you.
Thank you. With respect to revenue, I'd like to point out there's a bit of a discrepancy on what Ms. Montoya shared versus what is published. It was stated that the county estimated revenue at 8.1 million. I refer you to page 4 of the county's presentation document. Year-end projected revenue for the ELD at 7.9 million. If you were to take that number, look at year-end actual collections, I find it a bit challenging to get from there to 8.8 million the following year, nearly an $800,000 increase in revenue, which is something the ELED has never witnessed. Additionally, I want to clarify that there was not typographical errors entered by myself or my team. The interest in the amount of $150,000 exists this year because the county has yet to transfer any payments from the ELED to pay for personnel or other costs, on the Fund 100 side. Additionally, the line that is, I'm sorry, my voice is cracking. The line that is listed as $15,000 in revenue, we stand by the projected year end of $1,250. The only thing that has ever posted historically into that line are payments in lieu of tax. Those are federal offsets for lands that cannot collect funds. They're non-taxable. So it is confusing to me on how we can arrive at such a figure. And I also want to point out the budget itself does not follow budget law because it is not balanced. There is a difference of $134,954 between what is budgeted in the ELED versus what is budgeted in personnel. Thank you very much. Therefore, it does not follow budget law and is invalid.
I'm sorry, help me draw that out. I didn't see that.
Yes, of course. You wouldn't see it, unfortunately, because it is in OpenGov, and we've been told we can't bring OpenGov to show you, bring it up in this room. But I do have printouts, Mr. Rhodes, that indicate on the Fund 100 side, which is County General Fund, the personnel budgeted is $6,362,834, while the amount that is budgeted in contracted services is $6,227,880. That number must be a direct offset to cover all obligation in Fund 100. It is short $134,000.
Any follow-up, Mr. Rose?
I think Sandra's going to answer the question.
Yeah, Sandra, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Artman, for that clarification. There may very well be some slight variations because I don't know the intimacies of your operating budget. I was asked to balance your budget and preserve positions. So to the extent that I could see that revenue was going to outpace the projections and the original budget amount, that was the action that we took. The other thing was that we could see, based on CCSO's budget, that the administrative costs for CCSO were not being distributed. So again, that's different than cost allocations, but it's like a brother or a sister. Cost allocations is the original distribution of county overhead, county administrative overhead, our central services and our internal services. So those are things like finance, like payroll, TS, technology services is TS, facilities charges. Those are all considered cost allocations. I think we would all say, yes, those are normal overhead that needs to be distributed, and those get charged out. What we call indirect is the internal administration of a department that they are then dispersing or spreading amongst the receivers. So things like the director, because ELED receives benefit of the director service. ELED receives benefits from the recruitment services, the financial services within CCSO. So when you look at the county side, and I can't show you OpenGov. Tony, do you have the slides with the yellow bars, please, if you'll throw that up? Oh, and while Tony is doing that, I will respond to the illegality of the budget. The budget is balanced, it's just not in the line items. Again, because I don't know the intimacies of your budget the way that you do, but revenues do match expenses, and we have the authority, flexibility to shift costs within those line items, and we could do that very simply with a supplemental budget in 23-24. So before you, I have the CCSO budget, and again, the way that ELED works is in Clackamas County's budget, the enhanced law enforcement has a program. Let's see, if you look at the law enforcement section, enhanced law enforcement, you can see ELED. That program lives in the Clackamas County side. And you can see one of the things when we were asked to look for additional revenue, what the budget team saw is that all the red is all of the services of CCSO that are administrative in function, and the general fund is carrying the full burden of that administrative function. So that was what we were calling out, and we've actually been calling this out for a couple of years. This is fiscal year 22-23, and Tony, if you'll go to the next slide. In 23-24, you see the exact same thing. It's the general fund is covering 100% of those costs. Again, we raised the issue and said, this is an opportunity to increase CCSO's revenue and move those costs to the receiving programs. That is a legitimate business cost because you are providing a service. So that would help offset that the general fund. It would bring in additional revenue to the general fund and help the problem within the sheriff's department. And it's not just the sheriff's department, this is every department around the county. And so everywhere in the county, all of the departments listened to the recommendation and made those changes. So those are I think I've captured every point that you made, and I don't know if you have any other questions, I'm available.
I'm going to go to Mr. Carpenter.
Mr. Schmidt, you mentioned July 2022, you were hired a consultant to change the costing methodology. Who directed you to change the costing methodology, and what's the benefit to the Clackamas County taxpayers?
It's under my authority as county budget officer under the Oregon State Statute and County Code 2.09, and then the budget committees, when they meet, gets to decide if they agree with my recommendation or not.
What was your motivation for changing the costing methodology?
Well, I can talk for an hour on that. The cost allocation model is about 30 years old. It's almost not meeting federal guidelines. It needed to be revised. It had to be. It was not a choice. So we hired a consultant to give a recommendation. I accepted some of the consultant's recommendations, but not all. And I decided to propose to the budget committees, including this one, to accept these changes to better meet federal standards, to better distribute costs across the entire organization, to fund our internal service department. Something that was missed earlier. I froze my choice, and the budget committees agreed. I froze allocated costs in this entire organization for 3 fiscal years. And not a single person complained at that point. But now that we're truing up the cost, of course, no one's pleased. But it's the cost of doing business at Clackamas County. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'm going to be as polite and courteous as I can. A few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, Sheriff Brandenburg, Under Sheriff Morrison, and Nancy Artman met with our staff, Sandra and Cindy Becker and Elizabeth Comfort and the administrator, and we had a discussion about the budget and about assuring, at least from my perspective, and I knew my colleagues here at the dais were also supportive of making sure that there was not any positions cut. And I conveyed that to the sheriff, and I also conveyed that I would go so far as a line item in every budget. The point of the matter is that I was also trying to find a way amongst ourselves how we, number one, streamline these different budgeting techniques in these different budgets. It is not advantageous for us, nor is it transparent to the public when we have two different finance systems, or, we have a chart of accounts here, there's something different over there. So we can't even talk with the exact same numbers, with the exact same language. That puts us, and us, all of us, at a disadvantage. It makes it confusing. Now, I don't say there's anything deliberate about it, but we need to move things into the 21st century, okay? The cost allocation is one of those. I think we need to streamline our software, and so we're on the same budgeting type numbers. We should be able to look at the same thing, we owe it to the public, to look at the same budget and the same numbers and streamline this. So I ask everyone, and I asked that day that we do that. It's imperative, frankly, we owe it to that. We also need to find a way, and this is something I brought up at that meeting before, to what can we do to help the sheriff's office hire up to fill those positions, because, people that pay into ELED want to see the sheriff's office fully funded. People that pay in their general property taxes for the general fund support of the sheriff's office want to see those positions funded. Those that voted for the levy want to see those positions filled. We ought to be focusing on how we fill the positions. I think that's job number one. But I just want to stress that here we are today, working from two different sets of books, if you want to call it that. Not saying there's anything right or wrong with that, but we should need to streamline these numbers and work from the same system. That's creating more confusion. And I'm sorry for our citizen members that are here today that volunteer their time, whether it's here at the Budget Committee or whether it's at the ELED board. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But it's unfortunate that some of this is coming out like it is. It shouldn't be. I will also say, again, being courteous and being respectful, everyone, that in my years of being a county commissioner and thank you to the sheriff's office staff that have sat on those one-on-ones to talk about the budget and how things are budgeted, it becomes clear to me that from the questions I've asked and the admissions of the sheriff's department, that they're not able to see critical data that would allow them or us or anyone to understand what the true cost allocation, or the true cost of any one position is. For example, a deputy. We should know the complete cost of that. Otherwise, if you can't, how do you provide and give an estimate to a school for an SRO, a school resource officer? How do you prepare for a budget for the city of Wilsonville that gets sheriff's office services? Without those numbers, and again, I've been in the budget world my whole life as a business owner and also in public service, I really think that there's a lot of advantages of upgrading the sheriff's office budgeting system in a way that will enlighten them to find efficiencies and to better price out some of the services they provide. And the city contracts are one of my biggest concerns, that they're not being properly expensed because they don't have the software set up to see what they need to do and to price it accordingly. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with that. Sheriff Brandenburg, is it true that you do not know the total fully loaded cost of a deputy?
We absolutely do.
Can you provide that dollar amount for us today when it's available?
I'm looking at my finance manager.
If I give you an actual number based on a deputy, or I can give you an average rate of about $158,000 per year. Hello. Now that I have your attention.
Yeah. To me, it's not the dollar value, it's that.
Yes. And if I may, that data comes to us from the budget office each year. It's called an allocated position summary report. We get the amounts for each person that we have in our budget, both filled and unfilled. We know the exact dollar value to the cent of what that individual will cost. And as a point of clarification, we do not have a separate accounting system. We all use OpenGov throughout the county for budget, and we use PeopleSoft as the general ledger, and that is where we get our data. There is not a separate system in any other department except for maybe Water and Environment Services, because they are a unique independent district.
Thank you. And just my understanding of my 3 years being on the LAD, we've been working from these fixed costs, which I don't have any reason to doubt your testimony here today, and we've been working on that, and we've we've been under the assumption that the ELED revenue has not been keeping pace with the increase of costs of everything, and we've always been focused on that to a laser point because we don't want, and I appreciate the comment that you made, Commissioner Savas, about not cutting any positions and always filling that. That's why I serve on the ELED, to make sure that the 36 deputies are staffed above and beyond all else. But we've been working under that data, and again, just for me saying for the record, you have that figure, it's fully, you have that cost, and I have no reason to doubt that, and that's a budget that you've been working off of. I think, Mr. Rhodes, you had a question, then I have another question.
So my question is going back to what Sandra was talking about, the sheriff's administrative costs, that model. So two parts to my question. The first is just some clarification. So as opposed to allocated costs, which are county services that are provided by and billed through the allocated cost model, which would be another question, that is bore by the departments. Your explanation of the sheriff's administrative costs is similar in nature in that there are functions inside the sheriff's office, the office of the sheriff, and the things that the sheriff, that office does, that should be shared within the district, and I'm going to guess probably the levy as well.
Yes.
And I'm assuming then that the model that you're using to build this to the ELED is new, not previously billed before.
No, it's actually an existing model that we received from CCSO, and they partially distribute, although I would say the documents that I showed earlier, it's not transparent. It has not been transparently distributed, which is why even on our accounting side, we were not able to find it. So that is absolutely an issue that we would flag and say that is something that needs to be improved, because you shouldn't have to do forensic accounting to identify the fact that costs are being distributed. It should be transparent, much like a cost allocation plan. And so that was something that we have been calling out, again, I said for a couple of years. What, as Commissioner Savas said, when we met, I believe it was sometime in April, the response from CCSO was, we do distribute administrative costs, and they sent us the spreadsheets, and they sent us the distribution calculation, so the percentages. And that is what we used. Unfortunately, it wasn't all of the positions in the administrative. I believe it was 2 programs, and it was only a few people. And we would look at it and say, well, that entire administrative line of business should be distributed, as well as, we didn't even go full bore, because I would say training should also be distributed. I would say there was another, like a critical incident program. Those are all programs that in the contract get called out as being used. And so we would say, really, all of those costs should be fairly distributed. Again, and I said this to the Budget Committee a month ago, if the Budget Committee chooses to subsidize ELED or any other program, that does not matter to the finance team. We do the bidding of the board. And so if the board makes that choice of subsidizing programs, not a problem. We have that directive, and we will happily distribute based on that formula. But the directive we have received is fully recover the cost that the county is bearing. And so that was the charge that we had when we went searching for opportunities. And again, it was opportunities to preserve positions, because it's very different when you're being conservative on revenue and aggressive in expenses, and you have the money from year to year. You have the cushion. But when we're turning over rocks to balance the budget, you start getting more, I guess, like a dog with a bone, of trying to catch every little thing. Are we looking at every little nuance to preserve positions?
Okay. So the model is different or enhanced, that it incurs more expense to the ELED than it did before.
Yes, absolutely.
And then for the sheriff, is there a chance that then this results in, obviously, an increase, but I hear your thoughts on how that increase will be borne by the ELED, and does it then result in essentially, I heard you say double billing or billing twice for the same service, and I just want to clear that up, and I know that you have an opinion on that.
Yes, so we do bill. We direct bill, and they also carry and pay for their fair share of these costs. If you want more detail, I know that Nancy has that detail. And to the point of the ELED paying additional over and above the administration of the sheriff's office, these taxpayers already pay for the sheriff's office to have their base services. They pay for me and the undersheriffs with their taxes. We're general fund funded. And because they voted yes for 36 positions of additional deputies that they're paying for, that the county's not paying for, they get the gift of being charged again for me to administer the program. And I understand that that may be perhaps a business practice that is used widely, but I think that these taxpayers paying twice, sometimes 3 times if they're also paying the levy, is unfair.
So they're billed. But if the sheriff saw, the office of the sheriff, not the department as a whole, this small piece, which is you and your command staff and some others, I think 29 FTE, that's currently funded solely by general fund, right? And so if they're going to use an allocated cost model and bill a portion of this to the ELED, is it then not, then you're not funded solely by the general fund? That portion then would be carried by the ELED. You're not being paid twice, right? I mean, that's, for my clarification, this is a shift in what is currently or traditionally been 100% funded by the general fund will be reduced, and it'll be funded partly by the ELED and partly by general fund. Is that a correct understanding?
If I'm following you, and
I'm
partially
sorry if I'm unclear.
by the levy, and it's complicated. And it's complicated. And my team has any thoughts on that?
Yes, so to address your question, when you take a department and look at its entirety and its cost to distribute it out, there are things in there, first of all, that should be removed. Uniform guidance tells us, and it's an accounting construct, it tells us that certain costs need to be taken out and not considered. This methodology was rushed. That was not contemplated. My team and I have assessed the departments that were considered and included in the administrative overhead. There are several costs that should not have been in there. Some of these things also, to the sheriff's point, are double billed. That includes a cost allocation double charge in that you've already billed Office of the Sheriff, you've already billed our PSU, which is our investigations, our Public Information Office, our Finance Office. They already have those costs built in, as does the levy and the ELED. All the budgets are robust and contain all costs. And as a point of clarification, I've heard comments made that the ELED and the levy pay just personnel, don't pay other costs. As long as I've been at the Sheriff's Office, which is nearly 10 years, and prior to that, cost allocations have been distributed fairly through actually the model the county now uses by FTE. So if you look at that budget, I can't in earnest understand. I do understand the idea of administrative overhead. I understand that. I can't understand how you can take an entire budget and apply it to a budget that already has all those same costs built in. They're already paying cost allocations. They're already paying training expenses. They're paying liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance. And to then burden them with an additional load, and in the case of the ELED, is destructive. And yes, if you have any follow-up, I'd be happy to address that.
I believe it was Commissioner West and then Commissioner Savas.
I'm going to defer my comment because it's slightly off what we're on right now. So I'll go down and then come back to me when it's on this point, but it's not quite what we're talking about now, so I don't want to distract.
You got it. If I forget, flag me, please. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for clarifying and articulating my question I had asked earlier and getting down to this communication, budgeting technique and how we're doing it. This is where the problem really is. And my question was misunderstood with regards to the cost of a deputy. I put the cost of the deputy in the context of either an SRO or the city contracts. And I don't know exactly how you do it, but I've asked the question in so many different ways. I never got a clear answer or got any confidence that it was being properly done. And I'm not saying it's improper. I'm just saying that it's not well thought out to capture all the expenses. And I appreciate the sheriff making the statement that she made. She said that her cost or her wages or whatnot, was the exact right words, were paid for by general fund. Okay, well, in the world I come from, which is, I guess, private sector, but there again, also with 25 years of public service, it would seem appropriate that the sheriff's salary, if you will, let's just say the sheriff's salary and the undersheriff's salary, all the management staff should be partially embedded in the contracts. Okay, whether you do that by a per deputy cost or you do it in a different way. And I have asked that question over the years, and I've never got any clean answer whatsoever. And that's where my confusion comes in. I should be able to see it, you should be able to see it, and we can actually do a better job of getting revenue from the cities or the schools for SROs or whatnot. And that would it's just a way of, not necessarily as a means of budgeting, but as an analytical tool, as a costing tool. There are things you can do with the budgets and numbers, if they're set up properly and the reports are done well, that can do that. The sheriff's office has not demonstrated that ability to me yet. That's what was my question. I didn't ask for the sheriff deputy's roll-ups as far as what a deputy cost. It's how it's being costed or expended. And the fatal flaw here really is an examination of that is saying that the sheriffs and the undersheriff are paid for by the general fund. It should be spread out across all the functions, period.
Thank
May I
you.
address Commissioner Savas' question?
Yes, you may address that question or comment.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner. We use the same amount for a deputy, for a captain, for whatever position, for each of our contracts. The cost is the cost is the cost. So that is a very solid number that we can point to. If, let's say, using the city contracts as a model, as an example, if they had a motors deputy, there would be ad to pay, they would receive 5% more. A school resource officer does not cost the sheriff's office more. But in each of the contracts that we negotiate with the cities, formerly with TriMet, with the school resource officers, with North Clackamas School District, we do include administrative overhead. So there are charges where they allow. We do the same for grants as well. So where the contract allows and where the parties have signed off, we charge those costs. So it's not that we are not incorporating that. As a matter of fact, we're currently in negotiation with the cities to update an IGA that's a little on the old side.
Exactly.
We're going to very clearly delineate line by line what each of the costs are, and there will be no question as to what they're being charged. But with respect, sir, we use the same system as the county does to pull cost. So we know exact payroll cost, and we're charging that cost. We're charging them for equipment, for uniforms, for vehicles. We know the exact amount, and I would be more than happy offline to sit down and go through that with you, because I want you to feel confident that we have those figures.
Yeah, I don't think there's any impropriety, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely, you and I are not even communicating right now. I don't think you really understand what I'm asking or what I'm saying. So you're using cost in one term, in one nuance, in one context. I'm using it in a different one to make a point. So are you saying the sheriff herself is incorrect in saying that her salary is paid for by the general fund?
I'm saying that a portion of the sheriff's salary is paid by the cities and is paid by grants. That's standard practice for accounting. So her salary lives in the general fund in Fund 100, but there are certain agreements where we can charge a portion of it, and we do so.
So where is that cost reflected, other than put the contract aside? Where is the admin cost for the upper leadership of the sheriff's office in those contracts? Not in the contract itself, but where is it in the budget so we can find it?
We complete those as journal entries. We've had some difficulty with the new chart of accounts, getting things to align. We complete them at year end as journal entries. I'd be more than happy to show you the costing. I can pull a grant, or I can pull another document and show exactly where those are done and how we do them. I'd be happy to walk you through it step by step.
It should be built in and accessible and monitor month by month by month, and it's not. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And they are included, sir, in the contracts that come before you for approval.
I'm not talking about the contracts. I'm
But that
talking
is
about
where the document and the
talking about
basis
budgeting.
is.
I'm talking about the budgeting aspect. It should be transparent. We should all be able to see it.
I believe Commissioner West.
Thank you. Along these lines, we've been talking about allocated cost. Gary, question for you. It's been my understanding since, I don't know, like week one, I was sworn in January, that you were working on finding a glide path for the sheriff's office to help them deal with the change in allocated costs, because there was a significant change to all departments, and that is my understanding. It's $1.5 million to help with that expense. I haven't really seen much of the sheriff's communications mentioning that subsidy to help with that glide path, to be a good partner with them. And some of those central services and allocated costs that are used the most are, am I right, like HR, county council, facilities, technology service, and even finance. So am I correct that we are even trying, that there is, can you speak to, am I understanding correctly that that is to help pad this transition?
I accept that the raise in allocated costs have been concerning to all departments and offices. So for 1 year only, the upcoming fiscal year, I've offered a one-time subsidy from the general fund to almost every department, including the sheriff's office, of in the case of the sheriff's office, $1.5 million to ease the pain for the next fiscal year, to give her time and me time working together to find a glide path. So yes, that is true.
Okay, thank you.
Sheriff Brandenburg.
Thank you. The 1.5 million subsidy is for tomorrow's budget. It's not for ELED here today, but I would like to reply that our jail medical, our expenses went up in general as well. Jail medical went up for 1.4 million this year. So that really offset that subsidy. It's next year that we're going to find ourselves in a very deep hole. And but this is for tomorrow, and for today is not part of the ELED. Chair.
Thank you, but good to note. I have a question, then I'll go back to Mr. Rhodes. This is for you, Ms. Montoya. So if I wrote it down correctly, we had, in the last couple of years, looking at that revenue, we had a couple of years, I believe you said it was down 70,000 one year, down 90,000 one year, up 180,000 one year. So my question is, we're anticipating an 8% increase. What happens if it's half that? What happens if it doesn't come through? Because and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm certainly no mathematician, so full disclosure on that. But we've never seen a jump in the increases we're forecasting, and I sure hope it's accurate. But my concern is that it doesn't come in, it comes in, say, at 4%, which according to the annual trends is still almost double what we've seen in the past. What happens to the ELED budget, and would we have anticipated potential cuts if the revenue is not there?
Thank you very much. The increase in property tax is actually 4%, so not 8. And I think that, well, I know there are vacancies in the ELED. We can show you a 16-year history of vacancies. There's always vacancies. They're unavoidable. And so when there are vacancies, that generates a savings in costs. And so I think that even if these revenue, if I was to agree that, yes, the revenue is too aggressive, there will be savings as well to offset those.
So where did I get an 8% from? Was I incorrect on that, an 8% increase? So it was actually 4%.
Oh, so the total budget is 8%. Property tax is 4%.
Okay. So you're using the other 4% for salary savings for current and anticipated vacancies?
That is an option. And I would also point out that the recommended budget from CCSO had 2 positions cut. So I guess I don't see a downfall if year-to-date property tax is already greater than what was projected. The new number, it's a higher base, so that's what was applied with the property tax growth, which gets you to a higher property tax number. The interest earnings is already higher than what was projected. So again, then that creates a higher base so that you can have a higher number in 23, 24. That's how we got to the revenue side. And then, well, you haven't asked about cost allocations, but I would like to respond on that as well. CCSO staff has said that the costs are distributed based on the cost allocation of the county. You'll hear tomorrow, and I said it last month, the county's cost allocations have been short. With the new systems and on the upgrades that we have been doing over the last couple of years, we can now track better, we can report better, and we have been able to identify that the general fund has been subsidizing programs all across the county, not just CCSO, it's all across the county, and that is why we updated the cost allocation. So you have to use the higher numbers. It's going to generate additional revenue, and on the receiving side, it's going to generate additional expenses, but that is a fairer way. And again, if the board chooses to subsidize, that is up to the board, but we need to at least know what the cost is, the true cost. So I would argue and say, you can't possibly know what the cost of an officer is today because the allocations have been short. It's not until we have full cost allocations that you would be able to identify the full cost of an officer to be able to accurately charge a contract.
Thank you. I really genuinely think I understand all of that, so thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Rhodes and then Mr. Carpenter.
My question is for Mr. Madcore.
I'm still here.
Okay. There was reference to the IGA.
Yes, sir.
In particular, Section 5M. And my question is, now having better understood who the parties are to this IGA, does there appear in this change in the cost model, as the sheriff mentioned, there's been new changes in new billing, in your opinion, does this present a challenge or perhaps a violation of this IGA?
In my opinion, no. In my opinion, the IGA clearly contemplates the billing of costs incurred by the county to the district for services provided by the county itself. It's indirect costs, it's direct costs. It includes HR, PGA, legal, county administration, payroll, finance. The list is pretty extensive. And if you look at Section 3, Section 4, Section 5, property management, risk management, CCOM, records management, those are all county-incurred costs that can be properly billed to the ELED for services performed. It's similar to what we do with the Fair Board, with the Vector Control District, with other standalone entities, even West for that matter. We would bill them for county-provided services. Does that answer your question, Mr. Rhodes?
Exquisitely, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, I guess this would be for Ms. Montoya. What percentage of the ELED budget is dedicated to debt service for the new courthouse? Or is that all coming out of the general fund?
Yeah, I don't have that answer for you. We could do some research and back into that number.
But it has been factored into the ELED budget, the payments for the new courthouse?
This is Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director for the county. We have not taken out debt for the courthouse, so we'll be paid with the general fund. And what the process is we are looking for capacity in our unrestricted general fund dollars to make that annual payment to our vendor.
And what's the annual payment for the courthouse? I'm just curious on the debt service.
It varies. We have a forecast over 30 years. So we have a fixed capital cost, which is $11 million. Then on top of that, we have operations and maintenance. And then we also have reserve replacement dollars to replace equipment as the 30 years progresses. So those are all out of the general fund, and it ranges from approximately $12 million to $17 million based on the year when we need to collect additional replacement reserve funds.
Next year, are we looking at 12 million or 17 million for the payment for the courthouse coming out of the general fund?
Yeah, so it's approximately $15 million, and they start in May of 2025.
Okay. And I'm curious, I apologize for this. Was the courthouse voted on, or is this just coming out of the, was this a levy that was passed? I apologize for not knowing the answer.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how far we want to go in this conversation,
I don't
but
want to
there
get in
was.
the weeds, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's, so ELED is property taxes, so it has to go to the voters to approve. We're paying for the courthouse construction out of general fund, existing general fund, which includes property taxes, but there's other unrestricted dollars that are collected. And so the no vote is required for this payment.
Okay, no vote on this payment for the
Except for
courthouse.
by the commissioners.
Right, understood. Okay.
Just, Chair, if I just can, I just want to clarify.
Yes.
The question originally was it, does ELED make a payment for the courthouse? The answer is no. Ever, right? ELED is not going to make any payments. It's the general fund that'll make the payments, not ELED. I want to make that perfectly clear, unless I am dead wrong, but.
You are
yeah.
correct.
But I hear what you're saying, but I'm connecting the dots here. I mean, you guys got to come up with $15 million next year out of the general fund. And as far as I know, taxes have not jumped up significantly. So it sounds like you guys are allocating costs to various departments. Is that correct, to create the room for the $15 million? Apologize for my C- in Finance 316, but I'm just kind of putting this.
There's a claim out there.
Is it an accurate claim?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask? I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but where's the $15 million coming from? It's coming from the general fund, right?
Attend the Budget Committee tomorrow morning, you'll hear all about it.
I'd love to.
Mr. Wells, forgive me, we have two other districts that are way behind schedule, so I just wanted you to be aware of that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or any, Mr. Rhodes?
For Gary, if a budget is proposed and accepted and then fails, what avenues would this county use to subsidize or fill an ELED budget that was incorrect? In other words, if there's an allegation that this budget is not sustainable as proposed, and we do endorse it, and it happens, and then down the road, 6 months from now, we find out that, well, perhaps the sheriff was correct and we were wrong, what is the avenue by which we can fix that?
There's supplemental budgets all year round, and if I'll say it, these are my staff. If my projections are wrong, I will recommend to the Board of County Commissioners I use general fund to subsidize the difference. That's my commitment. But I'm so confident in my finance team's numbers, I don't think that's necessary. But if I'm wrong, I will recommend to the board, it's their decision, the general fund will help subsidize ELED to keep you whole.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So I just want to add that in the case when, in any budget, in any government law, Oregon government law budget, if the revenue does not come in and is not recognized as projected, then expenses are reduced. So we're always monitoring. This is part of our plan here at the county as we have better tools that Senator mentioned. We have our OpenGov. We're doing period close starting July, which means we'll be looking at our financial records every month, and so we can have a current look at where ELED is, as well as all the other county departments. We have a $1.7 billion budget, and we're anxious to keep monitoring each of these expenditures. And that's why I want to connect with Nancy after this, because if we have transactions that are behind, we need to get them up to speed because we're in May of this fiscal year.
And did you have a comment, Ms. Comfort? No. Just here.
No, I want to make sure we have a staff member that had a card up there. Cindy Becker, could you recognize her?
Sorry, I don't have my own card, so.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was Cindy Becker's card.
No, well, because I don't have one yet, but so I had to use it. It's a faux card.
Please go ahead.
Is this mic on? Yes. It is? Okay. I've been working very closely with the budget team, and I just want to clarify some things because I think it's not as confusing as it appears to be. The cost allocation, dollars, the cost allocation charges, are charged to a department. The department decides how to distribute those dollars. We do not make that decision within a department, so the department director decides how much each of the programs within the department are going to have to pay those cost allocation dollars. And for the administrative overhead, we used the formula that the sheriff's office has been using and applied that same formula to the distribution of administrative overhead. Administrative overhead, as you've heard, is something that is done. It should be done as a standard practice. In the budget that we saw initially from the sheriff's office, all of the sheriff's office administration was 100% general fund. If there was an allocation, I'm not saying there wasn't, it doesn't show up in the documents that were provided. So we can just only go by those. And so when we did the administrative overhead distribution, we didn't double bill it. We subtracted those administrative costs that the sheriff's office said they already did. So we subtracted that and then used the same distribution formula. So I want to be clear, there's no double counting, there's no triple counting, there's no triple billing. There's one set, and the departments decide how to distribute those dollars.
Thank you, being cognizant of the time. I appreciate that. I have to ask for a clarification because I'm hearing two different things and I'm confused. Sheriff Brandenburg or staff, can you make a comment on that? Because I believe you did mention that it was being allocated twice.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. So to reiterate, and just for the sake of brevity, because I know that we're going quite over, there are costs that are built into the ELED, and I'm going to address the ELED because we're here to discuss it today. They cover their own debt service. They have a share of cost allocations. They pay for their own training. They pay for uniforms. They pay for all standard costs that you would expect that a full budget program would pay. Those are all included already in the ELED budget. If we then take a portion of the entirety of another program's budget to include all of those costs and apply a share of that to the ELED, it in fact is paying twice. The way that the sheriff's office has always spread cost allocation is based on FTE. It is the one consistent model that we have. Again, I want to be clear that cost allocations are those things that we pay for county services. It is for these ladies here for county finance. It is for county administration. It is for human resources. We pay a share of those. We understand that is the cost of doing business. That is quite different than the proposed administrative overhead model, which includes all of the costs of 5 different programs within the general fund budget.
Thank you. Ms. Montoya, please.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, Nancy gave us the $3.2 million that had already been distributed in CCSO's administrative overhead. We subtracted that from the number that got distributed from that difference. So we took the difference, not the double. It is not double. Even though we couldn't identify that $3.2 million being distributed, as I said, we couldn't find it anywhere in the accounting records, and we certainly couldn't find it in the budget, because I showed you in the budget that it's 100% general fund paid for. So we couldn't find it in either place, but we said, you know what, let's be conservative. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, and we will subtract that number from the ultimate number that got distributed. And then we applied the same formula that CCSO said they were already using. So not double, just once, but we are saying it shouldn't just be a portion of my salary. If I am being fully distributed, it should be my entire salary that is being distributed. And it shouldn't be, and when we asked, we said, what about the computer? Like if we took the sheriff as an example, what about the sheriff's phone and her car and her computer? All of those are costs that should be distributed out. And they said, no, we selected which positions would be distributed, which left a big difference. So again, multiple points. You cannot see it, that it's being distributed, but we did take their number and discount that. We subtracted it.
Thank you.
If I might just conclude, we have shared the facts as we have them, the information that we have, the sheriff has shared with you and has responded to your questions, as have I, out of respect for these proceedings, for you all, and for this organization. I don't want to engage in a further she said, and I respectfully conclude my presentation.
Thank you. I respect that and appreciate that. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, as a member of the district, ELE district here, I'm inclined after this discussion, following the budget proceedings and at a time in the future to discuss a means of rectifying this issue, whether that is a consultant or an auditor or a mediator or all the above, but we need to rectify this. The public deserves more transparency on these issues. With that, Chair, I'm ready to make a motion to approve the budget in the interest of time.
Thank you. Yes, and I just very quickly, I echo that because, again, I want to come to these hearings with the best information and to be able to, do my job as a volunteer to support all of your hard work. So I appreciate that request for clarity, and I know the LED would certainly welcome that. Before I will get your motion going ASAP, for the record, Mr. Schmidt, you said that if we fall, your revenue is short, and we don't have enough money, I'm going to be super simple here. Your recommendation, I understand you don't make it happen, but your recommendation would be that the county would use general funding to supplement any deficit in the LED budget, so no deputies would be cut.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we have to have a public hearing first before you can have any motions.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
We're missing the whole public hearing here. It's why
lost
I'm concerned about time, everyone.
Help me through. What do I need to do?
Open a public hearing, ask if there's anyone in the room that wishes to testify.
Thank you.
I withdraw the motion.
Yes. So is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak before the LED budget? Yes. Thank you for that oversight.
If you think you're confused, then you know how I'm feeling as a citizen peering in. My name is Shirley Morgan with Citizens for Public Safety, and I am one of law enforcement's biggest supporters and have worked with the Sheriff's Office in the past 20 years dealing with drugs in the Mount Hood area. When I read a letter in the paper about the concerns our sheriff had about the budget process, and then read name-calling by Commissioner West that the sheriff is using her deputies as a political pawn, I got angry because it disrespected the entire department along with the sheriff. I am not in support of the courthouse proposal that calls for all of our departments to make these cuts when services already are stretched and it circumvents voters' approval. I ran into Commissioner Smith in the hall at lunch, and she said she would answer any questions I have. I have 3 and a closing comment. 1, why did you exclude the sheriff from presenting her own original budget? I think that answer might have come today, but I want to ask that question, and I don't know who is best to answer it, Commissioner Smith.
We did not, Gary. The
How's your
sheriff
time?
had ample opportunity to present a budget. Am I correct on that?
As the budget officer of Clackamas County, I propose the entire budget to the county, and I'm doing what almost, not every, but almost every other county in Oregon does, where the county administrator and the finance director presents the entire organization's budget. I intended to do that this year with persuasion by the 6 elected officials of Clackamas County. They are allowed to speak tomorrow at the budget committee, so that will occur. Thank you.
Number 2, did you refuse to let her cut positions on her original budget? And if so, why?
So this is public comment, not time for back and forth, but Mr. Chair, if you'd like me to respond, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Yes, please.
All right. So again, I'm the budget officer for all offices and all offices of Clackamas County, including for elected officials. I know the sheriff disagrees. I'm only following state law. I believe, based on what you heard today, and today is only ELED, tomorrow's the full rest of the sheriff's office budget. Please attend or tune in, Shirley, that there's no positions that need to be cut. Based on what you heard today, budgeting to actuals instead of budget, using vacancy savings, and distributing the allocated costs and overhead to all funding sources, not just the general fund. There's no positions that need to be cut.
Thank you. Did you request general funds to be included in the 2021 sheriff levy?
Shirley, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Were any of the budget processes incorporating shifting funds? It sounds like they were. The cost of doing business shifting into the levy money that came in from the voters. Did you request general funds to be included in the 2021 approved levy?
So if I'm following your question, Shirley, I asked the sheriff to use levy dollars to pay allocated costs and overhead costs, to distribute the cost of allocated and overhead costs to all funding sources, including the levy, which in my opinion meets the voter intent of the levy. Yes.
As a citizen, I might recommend for future planning that that be incorporated in the levy when it's put before the voters, because I can tell you, when I read the levy to vote on it, I read and thought to myself, that's exactly what I'm voting for. It did not include any conversation about administrative costs, because I thought the same thing as the sheriff, that it was, they've already got administrative costs from the general fund. So I just might pose that as a recommendation that any future levies, and in fact, possibly this should be overlooked and pushed into the next levy that they apply for, that those administrative costs not be shifted over now, but when you make the formal request from voters. Thank you, Gary, for the answer to those questions. Closing. It's wrong not to allow an elected official to present their own original budget at these meetings. I would ask that you always allow department heads to present their original budgets, and if there's any adjustments to those budgets, that they should be discussed with all the appropriate sheriff's office officials so that it can be clarified. Or we wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here today. Look, honestly, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, because there's no opportunity for clarification. The sheriff needs to be at the table in all budget adjustments and changes. I know enough about budget planning when robbing Peter to pay Paul is at play. And it's a hard and difficult process to shift funds from here to there and expect everyone to understand it. Law enforcement is high priority in this county, and I hope this process can be resolved to see that the sheriff gets the budget, understands the budget, along with the commission, so that she feels best for her department services, because it impacts me and public service and every community in this county. It is high priority for us. So thank you all for recommending the possible mediation. Having additional conversations would have eliminated a lot of press. But I'll tell you what, it got me at the table, it got a lot of citizens' attention, and keep up the hard, difficult work. And thank you, Sheriff's Office.
Gary, the sheriff will have an opportunity tomorrow afternoon, correct?
She and the other 5 elected officials of Clackamas County will have a
So she has
chance.
not been excluded. Point of clarification. Thank you, Shirley, for coming forward.
Thank you.
Can I just say really quick? Regarding my statement, it was unfortunate that the sheriff, before I had even seen the budget or anybody on this commission, had already gone to her staff and threatened them with layoffs before the budget had even become anywhere close to being reviewed to that point. And I think it's unfortunate and cruel to go to the rank and file and the deputies of this county and to threaten them with layoffs before we were even close to anywhere near there. It was wrong and inappropriate. From every single deputy I've talked to, it really hurt morale, and it really hurt this county's law enforcement agency, and I just don't think that that was solid leadership. That's why I use that phrase.
Thanks for your clarification. I hope those are solved behind the scenes instead of in the paper next time.
Do we have additional community testimony? Yes, please come forward.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Willits. I own a Christmas tree farm and a nursery out in the county. And I guess I'd just like to reiterate what the previous speaker said. You know, the county sheriff should be entitled to present her own budget. And I see a lot of fog in this room today, a lot of double talk and whatnot. It's not really necessary, you know. She's the elected official. She ought to be able to present her own budget. And, you know, you guys are all elected officials too, and you're really not doing yourself very good, as far as I'm concerned. I and all my neighbors are supporters of the sheriff's department. And we don't want to see the sheriff's department degraded in any way, period. And I don't come to these meetings. But when I read about this a little bit, it kind of irritates the hell out of me. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have an additional community testimony? Going once, going twice, seeing none. Thank you both very much for coming today and for everyone coming.
So we'll ask if anyone on Zoom would like to comment next.
Oh, thank you. Is there anyone on our virtual audience that would like to comment?
Tony will lead.
If you would like to testify, please use the raise hand feature, and I will call on you in the order received. Mr. Chair, I do not have any hands raised at this time for testimony.
Thank you. Please, have we concluded the opportunity for public testimony? And then we'll be moving on, I believe, to Commissioner Savis's motion, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Could you please say your motion again? Because I
Yeah,
think I know what it was, but
I'm just
just
going to
so
make
we all
one
know.
comment just based on the public comment piece, and I appreciate the concerns. And unfortunately, it did make the papers. Any responses from anyone on the dais came afterwards, unfortunately. So that is unfortunate. The people have been knocking on my door and calling me, people I know in my neighborhood, people like yourselves. I've been telling them this. We're going to present a budget. The county's presenting a budget for the sheriff's department, whether it's ELED, all the above, that guarantees every position is filled. The sheriff's budget, as we understand it, cuts 34 positions. Which one do you want? And everyone says, I want the one that funds every position, boots on the ground, and people out there working. And that's the one I'm going to support. Thank you.
Can I?
So with that, Chair, I'm going to make a motion.
Commissioner Schrader?
I've spent, years doing this, and well, Angie is a good friend. I love you. I'm sorry that and all of you, we are in this position, but it happens because that's what happens when people are in leadership positions, and we have to make these difficult conversations and decisions. I want to echo a little bit what Paul said, because I think the ultimate solution is going to be this. I think we should move ahead with this today. I'm ready to do it. Tough choice. It's the way it's just got to do it. But what I'm really seeing longer term is that our two groups of finance people really need to integrate together and have deeper conversations, or we're going to be in Groundhog Day. And I've been here a while, and I know what Groundhog Day feels like, and this is like one of the biggest Groundhog Days I've had, because I've had to do sheriff's budgets since 2003. So what I would like to ask or suggest to people is to have the commitment, because we're like you, we're just trying to do the best we can with what we've got. And this county has a reputation of always supporting law enforcement. You can see the difference here compared to our neighbors up north and other places. You can see the difference in how we don't particularly think Measure 110 was a great idea. So you're not sitting here in front of a group of folks that's it's not anti-law enforcement. It's just trying to figure out the best way to budget, the best way to streamline, the best way, I think, to bring it into the 21st century. And if you're just going to have to work together, so as a commissioner, that would be to Angie and my friends in law enforcement, and to my friends in finance, and to my friend, the administrator, and colleagues. Please, can't you just get together so we're all on the same page with this? I'm sorry it didn't happen this time, but I refuse to believe that it won't happen. I believe it will happen. We just have to have the will to do so and stop talking past one another. So I've waxed eloquent. I've been quiet most of the time. So that's it. That's all I've got to say today.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioner Schull.
Yes, one quick comment. The difficulty we're experiencing today results from this board's dedication to law and order 24/7, 365. When we voted to do the courthouse, it was not an easy vote. But we did it to enhance law enforcement in the processing of law and order in this county. There's never been one breath on this board about defunding or degrading the effectiveness of the sheriff's office. We all know the importance of a well-funded police department and sheriff's department. If you think this is tough, once we get a few years down the road and we get this behind us and we start smoothing out on this budget that's been affected by the courthouse, another major civic project will come up, and it's going to be just as hard, and that's going to be a new jail. It will happen, and when it does, the board that's sitting here will suffer the same kind of headaches that we have suffered on the courthouse. So once again, Clackamas County is about law and order 24/7, 365, and that's one of my primary core values. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schull. Commissioner West.
Thank you. Yeah, as a new guy, this has been a tough process, especially being someone who is legitimately passionate about the work that the men and women do to keep us safe every single day. I have never heard one whisper of this board to ever come anywhere close to defunding any FTE, not fully funding what the Sheriff's Department needs, making it top priority number one. It's one of the proudest and shining stars of Clackamas County is supporting our law enforcement. And I'm proud that this board made every attempt behind the scenes to communicate clearly and discreetly what had happened. We never leaked to the media. We never threatened one FTE. We never made anybody feel like their job was hanging in the balance. We waited until the only comments that came out was just before this meeting because we felt like there was a misrepresentation of the character and the promise of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. I love our law enforcement department. I am so proud of the rank and file. And I make a promise to you today, and I probably everybody else on this dais would agree, every FTE will be funded regardless. We will find a path to make sure that those funds are available and that and that our law enforcement has the resources they need. I do vehemently disagree with the communications coming out of Sheriff Brandenburg's office. That's called being elected and working it out, and sometimes it gets a little heated. That's called democracy and a representative republic. But I want to let you know that I'm going to support the hard work and the clear leadership of Sandra Montoya, Elizabeth Comfort, and our finance team, because they have proven to be steadfast and clear in their communications in a way that has brought us through a very difficult budget cycle. And I trust the work of that department. And at the same time, I'm proud of our continued support of every officer in the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith.
Yes, thank you very much. So our finance team has found an extra $1 million that, of revenue that wasn't counted. I would think the sheriff's office would be happy about that. Our administrator has given the sheriff's office an additional $1.5 million subsidy and allocated cost to the budget. You would think the sheriff would be happy about that. Today, our administrator has given his personal guarantee. If revenues come in short, our general fund would make up for that. That's how confident we are of this budget, people. And let me tell you something else. I have some numbers, and it's on OpenGov. So the entire general fund budget that we get at Clackamas County is $155 million. You might want to write this down, or I have extra copies. General fund pays for public safety. Out of that $155 million, the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office gets $74 million. The Community Corrections Department is now under the Sheriff's Department. Disaster Management, $3.65 million. The District Attorney, $14 million. The Juvenile Department, $9.7 million. And Resolution Services is $629,000, for a total of $102 million from $155 million general fund that this Board of County Commissioners is directed to support public safety in this county. And yes, our crime rate is less because we have funded this. And we make a promise here today that we support the boots on the ground and all the efforts to keep our northern border safe from the Portland creep coming into this county and trying to do what they did to Portland. We will not tolerate that, and I have to say, working with the sheriff's office and her rank and file and her patrol and her investigation and her jail people are some of the finest people I've ever known, and we are dedicated to funding that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, if you could restate your motion, let's wrap this up.
I move that we approve the budget for the ELED.
We have a motion to approve the budget. Do I have a
So
second?
you have to read the numbers, please. Read the numbers in your script.
I do not have this.
Can I do it?
Yes,
Okay.
Chair, why don't you take the
I
motion?
will just go ahead and quickly say,
That would be fine.
thank you, Chair.
Please proceed.
I move that the committee approve the FY 2023-2024 budget for the Enhanced Law Enforcement District with a total of $8,888,752 and impose the maximum permanent rate of $70.719 per 1,000 of assessed value within district boundaries.
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wilson?
We're open for discussion.
That is correct.
I have a couple of questions for the sheriff. First one, with this proposed budget, what's going to be the impact on the ELED service levels? Is there going to be any impact on that?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So as if I understand what the board's intention is that they want every single position filled, all 36 positions. And so that's what will happen. I have serious concerns about the projections and if we have the funds to get there to the end of the year. I'm heartened to hear of the county administrator's commitment to fund those positions. So as far as I'm concerned, and my finance director, manager, that we would move forward to staff all 36 of those positions.
So besides the staffing, there is not going to be any changes in the service level that the ELED will be experiencing? You're going to have the same number of officers out there responding as quickly as they are now?
That's what I understand, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Because I'm confident that we're funding every FTE, aye.
Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
No.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson,
No.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Chair Wells,
No.
Chair, the result is 7-3.
7-3, the motion passes. So I believe we can move forward with a motion to adjourn, unless there's anything else I'm missing. Please correct me. All right, can I have a motion? I motion that we adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to thank Mr. Wells for chairing this meeting today. It was not easy. I've been in your position, and even with the most experience, it's difficult. I want to thank the citizens who served on this budget committee and an advisory role. It's a lot of hard work, I know, and I'm confident that we will support Commissioner Savas's recommendation to go ahead and possibly take a look at combining this. I just will say this. Clackamas County is a statutory county. We do not govern the way Washington County does or Multnomah County does. So statutorily, there is one budget, and that's the administrator's budget, and that's according to state law, which is constitutional. Clackamas County is the oldest county in Oregon, established in 1843. Thank you very much for coming, everyone who came and to listen to this.